Why was the woman standing alone near the range, with no insignia, no rank, no visible identity at all? No one knew. And maybe that's why they laughed. Dawn crept slowly over Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Coronado, a place where silence spoke louder than words, and sweat was the language of worth. The Pacific wind carried salt and discipline, whipping across the obstacle course where the newest class of SEAL candidates began their morning evolution. Each man and woman there carried a story stitched behind their name tags, dreams, fears, ghosts, and all of them believed they were being shaped into something greater than themselves. But one of them, Boone Castellano, carried more than just ambition. He carried expectation. He was a third-generation SEAL trainee. His grandfather had fought in the jungles of Vietnam. His father, James Castellano, had died 15 years earlier during a training accident that everyone whispered wasn't an accident at all. The Castellano name meant something here. It opened doors, and it built walls. At 28, Boone had his father's square jaw and his stubborn streak. He led his squad by instinct, running with the reckless drive of a man who feared being ordinary. As the rising sun painted the course in molten gold, he sprinted through the final stretch, pushing harder, faster, refusing to fall behind. "Castellano, you're drifting right again." The voice cracked through the morning air like gunfire. Commander Arcturus Blackwell. The kind of man whose words cut deeper than punishment ever could. "Maintain your line. This isn't a solo exhibition." "Copy that, Commander." Boone adjusted, pulling back slightly until his squad reformed beside him. Zaria Capper, the former Olympic swimmer. Rafe Thatcher, a wiry genius who saw every obstacle as a puzzle. And Quinlan Frost, their silent marksman who spoke less and noticed more than anyone realized. They crossed the finish line together. No cheers, no recognition. Here, finishing first only earned you the right to keep going. 5-minute water break, then the firing range. As they refilled their canteens, Rafe muttered, "Anyone else notice Blackwell's been harder than usual this week?" "Washout rates climbing," Zaria said, voice low but steady. "Rumor says an admiral's visiting, everyone's tense." "Which admiral?" Boone asked. "Vice Admiral Marshfield," Quinlan said quietly. "Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare. Word is she's reviewing the entire selection process." Boone frowned. "Never heard of her." "That's the point," Quinlan replied. No one questioned how he knew. Quinlan always knew things he shouldn't. Minutes later, they moved to the firing range. Dust and sunlight shimmered off brass casings littering the ground. The rhythmic sound of gunfire rolled across the field like distant thunder, measured, precise, relentless. And that's when Boone saw her. At first, she was just a silhouette against the morning glare, a woman in plain utilities, no rank, no name tape, no visible ID. She stood near the perimeter, partially obscured by a support column, hands behind her back, watching. He almost ignored her, almost. But something about her stance caught his attention. The way her weight balanced evenly, her posture perfect without trying. The way she watched, not with curiosity but with comprehension. 2 o'clock, Boone murmured. "We've got an audience." Rafe glanced over. "Civilian evaluator." "Wouldn't be in uniform," Zaria said, "and contractors wear badges." "She's been watching Quinlan," Boone noticed. "Haven't seen her eyes move once." The woman didn't flinch when the rifles cracked. She simply made notes in a small black notebook, her expression unreadable. When the exercise ended, she didn't move. She just stood there, calm, immovable, as if the chaos around her didn't exist. Boone's curiosity turned to irritation. This was a restricted training range, not a spectator show. "I'm going to find out who she is," he said. "Careful," Zaria warned. "Remember what happened last time you found out about a visiting Master Chief." Boone grinned faintly. I'm just being friendly." He walked toward the woman, boots crunching on gravel, his squad trailing behind, half intrigued, half nervous. As he closed the distance, he noticed the details up close. The thin scar along her jaw, calloused hands, a faint limp, no, not a limp, a careful adjustment of balance. She wasn't young, but there was a stillness about her that made youth irrelevant. "Excuse me, ma'am," Boone said, polite but firm. "This is a restricted area." "I'm aware," she replied without looking up. Her voice was low, controlled. She continued writing. Boone blinked. The dismissal was so casual it almost stung. Rafe stepped forward, diplomatic as always. "May I ask who authorized your presence?" "I did," she said simply, eyes still on the notebook. They exchanged glances. Zarya raised a brow. Boone's patience thinned. He took a half-step closer. "What's your rank exactly, ma'am? Just so we know who we're dealing with." The question carried a smirk, a challenge. The others chuckled quietly behind him. She finally looked up. And in that instant the air shifted. Her eyes were steel gray, clear and cold as ocean fog. She studied him for a long beat, then said one word. "Admiral." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. Before they could process, Commander Blackwell appeared beside them, snapping to rigid attention. "Admiral Marshfield," he said sharply, "we weren't expecting your inspection until tomorrow, ma'am." As if the universe wanted to punctuate his words, the base loudspeaker blared. "Attention all personnel. Vice Admiral Deline Marshfield, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, is conducting an unscheduled inspection. All section heads report for briefing at 900. The rookies' faces drained of color. Not just an admiral, the second highest authority in naval special warfare. And Boone had just smirked at her. He started to stammer an apology, but Marshfield raised a hand. "Save it, Candidate Castellano," she said. "Your performance speaks for itself, both the good and the problematic." The fact that she knew his name hit him harder than any reprimand. She hadn't just wandered into training. She'd come for them. "Continue the exercise, Commander," she told Blackwell. "I'll observe without interference." Then she walked away, calm, precise, her footsteps measured. Boone noticed something subtle as she moved, the faint outline of a prosthetic beneath her right pant leg, the kind used by combat amputees, and a glimpse of scar tissue on her wrist, the kind caused by defensive wounds. Who was this woman really? When training resumed, Blackwell's voice carried extra steel. "And Castellano, when this evolution is over, you and I are going to have a talk about respect." "Yes, sir." Zarya leaned toward him. "An admiral, you just asked a vice admiral." "How was I supposed to know?" he muttered. "By not assuming," Quinlan said quietly, resetting his scope. "Assumption is the first step toward failure." Over the next week, Admiral Marshfield became a ghostly presence. No entourage, no formality, just her notebook and her silence. Where other officers barked commands, she observed. Where others criticized, she watched. And every so often she would glance toward Boone, not with anger but with something far more unsettling. Expectation. Training intensified. More failures, more dropouts. It was as if her presence turned the base inside out. Then, during a night navigation exercise, Zarya noticed something wrong. Their compasses were off, coordinates altered by exactly 3 degrees, enough to push them into a restricted area filled with live ordnance. "This isn't a malfunction," she said, breath fogging in the dark. "Someone tampered with these." When she reported it, Blackwell dismissed her. "Sleep deprivation," he said. "Calibrate again, focus on your objectives." But Boone didn't believe it was exhaustion. Not after what he'd seen, the Admiral's quiet tension, the way she seemed to be watching for something beyond performance. That night after lights out, he heard voices from an administrative office. He shouldn't have been there, but curiosity had long since overruled caution. He recognized one voice immediately: Marshfield, calm but edged with steel. The security protocols have been compromised, Commander. This is the third incident this month. Someone is testing response patterns. Blackwell replied, his voice tense. These are training scenarios, Admiral, controlled stress factors. No, she said. I've seen this pattern before. It's deliberate. Someone's embedding assets within training units. Don't trust anyone you haven't personally vetted. Boone froze in the dark, heartbeat hammering. Assets embedded. This wasn't about selection criteria anymore. When she left the room, her posture was tight, purposeful, like someone preparing for a fight she knew was coming. He wanted to ask her, to understand what she meant, but something in her gaze the next morning told him not to. Still, he couldn't stop wondering. What had happened to make an admiral, the second highest officer in naval special warfare, walk the grounds alone, with no insignia, no security detail, watching rookies through a notebook filled with secrets? What was she really looking for? And why did she already know his name? Why was the Admiral still there every morning, quiet, alone, and watching them? No entourage, no cameras, just that same weathered notebook and the kind of gaze that could see straight through steel. Boone Castellano felt it each time she appeared, like standing in front of judgment itself. He tried to ignore it, to focus on training, but even the wind seemed to shift when she arrived. Her silence was unnerving, because silence meant calculation, and calculation meant purpose. 5 days after her arrival, something changed. The obstacle courses became harder. Simulations extended through the night without warning. Candidates were dropping like flies. Men and women who had survived months of brutal training suddenly, voluntarily withdrew. But no one believed it was voluntary. Marshfield didn't shout, she didn't intervene, she just wrote, watched, waited. Even Commander Blackwell, usually unflappable, seemed tighter, his jaw set, his voice clipped. And then came the first real sign that something beneath the surface was breaking. It happened during night navigation drills. The stars were veiled in thin cloud, and the team moved through the dark forest using only compass and instinct. Zarya led point, map in hand, the glow of her red lens light faint against the branches. Half an hour into the march, she stopped. "This isn't right," she whispered. "What's wrong?" Boone asked, crouching beside her. "Our coordinates, they've been shifted. Look east by 3 degrees. We're moving toward the live fire zone." "You sure?" Rafe asked. "I've been orienting since I was 12, she said, tightening her jaw. This was deliberate. They recalibrated and finished the exercise safely, but the question hung heavy. Who would risk their lives by tampering with navigational gear? The next morning, Zarya reported it. Blackwell dismissed her outright. "Sleep deprivation," he said coldly. "Equipment malfunctions happen. Get some rest, candidate." She walked out of his office shaking, fury hidden beneath discipline. Something was wrong at Coronado. And whatever it was, Marshfield knew. That evening, Boone was returning from an authorized call to his mother when he heard voices down the corridor. The admin office lights were on, the tone urgent, low, and serious. He recognized one of them immediately. "The security protocols have been compromised," Marshfield said, her voice clipped but calm. "This is the third incident this month across 2 facilities." "These are training scenarios, Admiral," came Commander Blackwell's reply. "Unexpected stress factors are part of the evaluation." "No," Marshfield countered. "Someone is embedding operatives during recruitment. I've seen this before. This isn't stress testing, it's infiltration." There was silence. Then her tone softened just slightly. "Arcturus, keep your eyes open. Don't trust the chain unless you've verified it yourself." The familiarity of her voice, when she used his first name made Boone freeze. They had history, deep, old, and probably classified. He didn't wait to hear more. He slipped away, heart pounding. By the time he reached his quarters, he understood one thing with chilling clarity. Marshfield wasn't here to inspect training. She was here to hunt. But hunt what or who? The next day he saw her again, alone in the tactics room, reviewing files. Her presence seemed to drain the noise from the air. He squared his shoulders and stepped forward. "Admiral Marshfield," he began. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." She didn't look up. "You're doing it already, Castellano." "I want to apologize for my conduct during your first visit to the range," he said. "It was unprofessional, yes." She finally looked up, eyes unreadable. "Arrogance is a luxury of those who haven't faced true combat," she said. "Your father understood that." Boone froze. "My father, ma'am." Staff Sergeant James Castellano, exceptional operator, better human being, saved 11 lives during Operation Kingfisher. "The record says 7, he whispered. Her expression didn't change. "Remember that discrepancy." She closed the file, nodding toward the door. "Your squad's waiting at the demolition range. Don't keep them waiting, candidate." He saluted and left, but his mind burned. She had known his father. Not from a report. Personally. That night he searched every restricted archive he could access. Operation Kingfisher. Minimal results, redacted lines, classified. But one blurred team photo stood out. In the background, barely visible, a woman in combat gear, commander's insignia, eyes like sharpened steel. It was her. The next day brought another shock. During a hostage rescue simulation, an instructor found live ammunition mixed in with training rounds. A single wrong shot could have killed someone. The base went into lockdown, investigation, no answers. And through it all, Marshfield remained silent, observing, writing, watching everything. That night, unable to sleep, Boone went running along the perimeter. The wind off the bay was sharp, heavy with the tang of salt. As he neared the administrative lot, he spotted her again. Marshfield, arguing quietly with a man beside an unmarked government vehicle. The exchange was tense. The man gestured sharply. She shook her head, eyes hard. When she noticed Boone in the distance, the conversation ended abruptly. The man left fast, too fast. Marshfield didn't reprimand him for being there. She just gave a small nod, as if acknowledging a fact neither of them would name. The next morning, Rafe approached Boone, face pale. "I've been mapping the failures," he whispered. "Compass tampering, ammo mix-ups, systems glitches. They're not random." Boone frowned. "What are you saying?" "They're tests. Someone's targeting candidates, watching how we react." "Testing for what?" "Adaptability, ethical response, crisis management." Boone felt a chill crawl through his chest, like a second layer of evaluation. "Or something worse," Rafe said quietly, "something hidden." Later that day, Zarya arrived with more bad news. "I've seen Blackwell using a comm device not standard to base protocols," she said. "Encrypted channel, civilian frequency." Boone exhaled slowly. This is way above training anomalies. That night they met secretly in an unused maintenance shed, 3 silhouettes under red light, whispering truths no one else dared. "Marshfield's here for a reason," Boone said. "If this is infiltration, she's investigating it from inside." "So we report it," Rafe offered. "To who?" Zarya shot back. "Blackwell. He's compromised or clueless. Marshfield's our only shot." Before anyone could reply, the door opened. Commander Blackwell stood there, face grim, voice low. "You're right," he said. "This isn't standard training anymore." They froze. He stepped in, closed the door behind him, and lowered his voice further. "Admiral Marshfield isn't just observing. She's hunting a mole within this program." Someone been embedding sleeper assets during recruitment. The silence in the shed turned heavy enough to choke on. She didn't tell you because she wasn't sure who she could trust, Blackwell continued. We've lost operators overseas, compromised missions. Every trail leads back here to training. Why tell us? Boone asked. Because you're already under scrutiny, and because after tomorrow's evolution, you'll all be separated for individual assessments. The warning hit like a punch. When morning came, Quinlan's bunk was empty. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Official word said he dropped out overnight. But when Boone returned to his quarters, he found something hidden under his mattress, a tactical knife and an encrypted comm device, both marked with Quinlan's ID tags. Before he could decide what to do, security stormed in. "Candidate Castellano," the lead officer barked, "you're to come with us now." They took him across the compound, to an administrative wing he'd never seen before. Inside, a small, windowless room waited. And standing beside the table, Admiral Marshfield. She dismissed the guards with a simple order. "Sit down, Castellano." He did, his pulse hammered. "I didn't take those communications, ma'am," he said quickly. "I know," she replied. She reached into her pocket and placed something on the table. A small, worn challenge coin, the exact kind his father used to carry. "He gave one to each member of his team," she said softly. "Your father carried this during Kingfisher." Boone stared, emotion caught in his throat. You were there." "I commanded the mission," she said. "We were compromised from within, just like now." She rolled up her pant leg, revealing what Boone had only suspected. A prosthetic limb, polished metal and carbon fiber. "Sniper fire, Kingfisher," she said, "the day your father didn't come home." Before Boone could speak, the lights went out. Red emergency strobes bathed the room in blood-colored glow. Outside, alarms, movement, controlled chaos. "They're making their move," Marshfield said calmly, pulling a sidearm from a hidden compartment. "Stay close." "What's happening?" "A calculated extraction. They're not here for you, Castellano. They're here for me." Through the window, Boone saw teams moving across the compound, organized, methodical. But something was wrong. Their patterns weren't defensive. They were securing. "Who are they?" he demanded. "People wearing rank they haven't earned," she said, tossing him an access card. "Find Capper and Thatcher. East Utility Tunnel leads to the communications center. If I'm not there in 20 minutes, use frequency 739er. Authenticate with phrase, Kingfisher asset secure." "And then what?" "Then we find out," she said, locking eyes with him, "if you're truly your father's son." The ground shook. Explosions echoed from the perimeter. Helicopters thundered overhead. No running lights, no call signs. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a drill. Boone grabbed the card and ran. Behind him, the Admiral, limping but steady, moved toward the chaos without hesitation. And in that moment, Boone realized the truth about her. She wasn't just an admiral. She was a survivor. And she was done running from ghosts. The first explosion wasn't the loudest. It was the silence before it that made your pulse stop. One heartbeat of stillness, then the world ripped open. Flashes lit the coastline beyond the compound, controlled detonations, surgical precision. Not an attack from outside, something far worse. An inside job. Boone Castellano sprinted through the corridors, red warning lights cutting across his face as alarms howled above him. The Admiral's words still echoed in his head. "Find Capper and Thatcher, East Utility Tunnel, frequency 739er. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't training. It was a takedown. Someone was trying to erase evidence. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Zaria Capper. "Boone, what the hell's happening?" she shouted over the alarms. "Blackout's not accidental," he said. "They're coming for Marshfield." Rafe Thatcher appeared seconds later, breathless, a handheld data unit glowing faintly in his hand. "Perimeter sensors are fried," he said. "Security patterns are reversed. They're locking us in, not out." That's when the realization hit all three of them at once. The extraction Marshfield warned about had already begun. "This way," Boone ordered, grabbing Zarya's arm and leading them toward the east tunnel entrance behind the barracks. The ground shuddered again. Somewhere near the docks, a helicopter landed, fast, low, stealth rotors cutting the night like blades through fog. Rafe checked his comm. "Base channels are jammed." "Then we use hers." Boone held up the access card Marshfield had given him. The magnetic strip gleamed red in the strobing light. "Let's move." They descended into the utility tunnels, narrow, concrete arteries running beneath the base. The air was thick, heavy with dust and oil. Emergency lights pulsed dimly along the walls. As they moved, Zarya whispered, "You think Marshfield's still alive?" "She's too stubborn not to be," Boone muttered. Rafe checked behind them every few seconds, his mind racing even as his movements stayed calm. Whoever's behind this had internal clearance. Look at the precision, timed detonations, power reroutes, jamming frequencies. No outsider could pull this off without inside help. They reached a junction where the tunnel split into three directions. Boone swiped the Admiral's card at a side panel, nothing. "She said east tunnel to comms," he said. "That's north," Rafe corrected, pointing toward the faint vibration of generators. "They mislabeled orientation after the last renovation. East, that way." "Then lead." They turned left, following the hum of distant electronics. Halfway through, footsteps echoed behind them, measured, metallic, deliberate. Boone motioned for silence. Three shapes appeared through the red gloom, armed tactical silhouettes, not standard security, no insignia. Zarya whispered, "They're using NVGs." "Wait until they pass," Boone breathed. But they didn't pass. They stopped, listening. One of them muttered into a comm device. Then, gunfire. The first round hit the wall inches from Boone's head, shattering concrete. "Go," he shouted. The three broke into a sprint, boots pounding against the concrete. Rafe dropped a flash charge, light exploding in the narrow space. The pursuers faltered, seconds gained, nothing more. At the next turn, Boone saw the faint light of the communication center door ahead. Reinforced steel, keypad access. "Swipe the card," Zarya shouted. Boone did, green light, door unlocked. They stumbled inside, sealing it behind them. The room was dark except for emergency monitors flickering weakly. Systems offline, manual controls only. Rafe immediately started working on the terminals. "Backup lines are isolated. I can get one frequency open if the hardware's intact." "Do it," Boone said. Zarya paced, adrenaline burning through her veins. "What if she doesn't make it here?" "She told us to wait 20 minutes, Boone said, checking his watch. "We wait." Minutes stretched like hours. Gunfire echoed faintly from somewhere above. The air trembled with the sound of helicopters overhead. Then a shadow appeared in the doorway's reinforced glass. The door opened with a hiss. Vice Admiral Deline Marshfield stepped inside, sweat streaking her face, uniform torn at the shoulder, a pistol in her hand. She looked at them once, then exhaled. "Good, you're alive." "What's happening out there?" Boone asked. "A coordinated extraction," she said, locking the door behind her. "They're pulling out compromised personnel and destroying evidence as they go." "Who's they?" Rafe asked. She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she crossed to the console and keyed in an override sequence from memory. The system flickered, rebooting on auxiliary power. "Frequency 739er," she said. "Kingfisher authentication." "Kingfisher," Boone repeated, the word tasting heavy in his mouth. The monitors came alive. Video feeds, data logs, encrypted overlays. Marshfield's face was bathed in cold blue light as she scanned the chaos unfolding across the base. Every compromised candidate is being extracted simultaneously, she said. Not just here, Coronado, Little Creek, Fort Bragg, it's coordinated. You mean? Special Operations Infiltration, Marshfield finished. Sleeper assets embedded during training. It's been happening for years. Rafe stared, stunned. You're saying this isn't just internal espionage, this is systemic. Marshfield nodded grimly. Whoever's behind this has reach across multiple branches. We've been compromised at the roots. Gunfire cracked again outside. The reinforced glass shook. They're coming, Zarya warned. Then we leave, Marshfield said, pocketing a drive she'd just removed from the console. We have what we need. They moved back into the tunnels, Marshfield leading this time, her limp barely visible, every motion deliberate. Where are we going? Boone asked. Harbor Master's office. There's a secure line there. From there we extract. As they moved, Boone's thoughts churned. Admiral, earlier you said this happened before, during Kingfisher. Marshfield's voice was low. Yes, and I lost good men, including your father. Her tone held no rank, no distance, just truth. They reached a service hatch leading toward the docks. When Marshfield opened it, the cold night air hit like a wave. The sky was full of motion, black silhouettes of helicopters, small crafts moving near the waterline. Stay low, she ordered. They moved along the seawall, the reflection of fires flickering off the water. Smoke curled from parts of the base now burning under the cover of darkness. Why burn their own facility? Zarya whispered. Because ash leaves no fingerprints, Marshfield said. They reached the Harbor Master's building, a squat structure near the docks, half lit by emergency power. Marshfield swiped her card. Inside, she connected her data drive to a secured transmitter. Rafe immediately assisted, rerouting signals through the auxiliary grid. Encrypted channel open, he said. Good, we send everything we have to Joint Command. Before she could transmit, a voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Admiral Marshfield, this is Commander Arcturus Blackwell. Stand down. You're under arrest by order of Naval Intelligence Division. Marshfield froze, her jaw tightened. You're making a mistake, Arcturus, she said into the radio. You're being used. The only mistake, Blackwell replied, was trusting you. Zarya's eyes widened. He's with them. No, Marshfield said quietly. He's being manipulated, same as before. Gunfire erupted outside, closer this time. Windows shattered inward. Go, Boone yelled, grabbing Zarya and ducking behind a steel cabinet. Rafe shielded the transmitter as bullets tore through the wall. Marshfield fired twice, 2 precise shots. The incoming team fell before they even breached the door. But they kept coming. They'll overrun us in minutes, Rafe warned. Marshfield glanced at the transmitter, data still streaming. Almost done. A single round shattered the power conduit beside them. Sparks cascaded across the floor. The screen went black. Transmission failed, Rafe said, voice tight. Then we go manual, Marshfield said. She pulled a portable drive from the console, tossed it to Boone. Backup data, keep it on you at all times. What about you? She gave a faint, grim smile. Someone has to buy you time. Before Boone could protest, she stepped into the open, pistol raised, moving toward the advancing team like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Admiral, Boone shouted. Her only reply was a quiet, steady voice through the smoke. Find truth, Castellano. Don't inherit belief, earn it. Then the door slammed shut behind her. Gunfire erupted outside. Rafe grabbed Boone's shoulder. We have to move. But Boone hesitated, every instinct screaming to go after her. Zarya's voice cut through. If we stay, her sacrifice means nothing. He looked once at the sealed door, then turned away. Move. They fled down the pier, the night alive with chaos. Explosions flared behind them. The base, once the most secure facility in naval special warfare, was now a battlefield of shadows. They reached a small maintenance boat. Rafe cut the lines while Zarya powered the engine. As the craft drifted into the black water, Boone looked back. Smoke curled into the night sky. Helicopters rose, silent and unmarked. He didn't know if Marshfield was alive, but he knew she wasn't finished. Some people leave without goodbyes, others leave with purpose. And sometimes, the ones who walk into fire are the only ones who ever find the truth. They said the base fire was an accident. They always do. By dawn, the smoke over Coronado had thinned into a gray veil, and the official report was already written: fuel line rupture during night exercises, minimal casualties, contained before spread. No mention of gunfire, no mention of helicopters, and certainly no mention of an admiral who'd vanished into the flames. 3 rookies had slipped away in a stolen maintenance craft and disappeared before dawn. At least that's what the report said. In truth, Boone, Zarya, and Rafe drifted 30 nautical miles south before cutting the engine and hiding the boat beneath an abandoned pier outside San Pedro. They hadn't spoken for hours. When silence stretches that long, it becomes heavier than noise. Boone finally broke it. "She bought us time, we can't waste it." Rafe looked up from the portable drive Marshfield had given them, a slim, black data core sealed with biometric encryption. "I can't crack it without power or her credentials." "She said find truth," Zarya murmured, "not follow orders. Maybe that means starting somewhere else." They spent the day hiding in an empty storage yard near the docks. The smell of rust and salt clung to everything. Each of them wore the same exhausted expression, that quiet blend of guilt and disbelief that follows survival. When night came, Rafe rigged a small generator from salvaged parts. The drive came alive, projecting faint holographic fragments into the air, incomplete, corrupted files, mission logs, encryption strings. Zarya frowned. "What are we looking at?" "Names," Rafe said slowly. "Candidates, instructors, transfer orders. It's a recruitment matrix." Boone leaned closer. "Whose matrix?" Rafe hesitated. "Not ours." Scrolling lines of text revealed cross-references between military IDs and civilian shell companies. Cover identities, foreign contractors, even humanitarian NGOs. Zarya's voice lowered. "They've been embedding agents through legitimate recruitment." "Replacing operators before deployment," Boone added. "So no one ever suspects infiltration because the file says they belong." "Kingfisher," Rafe whispered. "It's not just history, it's a pattern." For a long time, they said nothing. The Pacific wind howled through the cracked shutters, carrying the distant sound of cargo ships and gulls. Boone finally asked the question none of them wanted to voice. "Do you think she's alive?" Zarya's eyes didn't move from the screen. "If she isn't, we owe her truth. If she is, she'll find us before we find her." The next morning, headlines hit every naval feed. Vice Admiral Deline Marshfield under investigation for unauthorized use of live munitions and breach of national security. Commander Arcturus Blackwell assumes interim oversight of Naval Special Warfare Training Command. Rafe slammed the tablet shut. "They're erasing her." "No," Boone said quietly, "they're afraid of her." They knew staying near the coast was suicide. By the second night, they'd moved inland, hitching rides under false names, sleeping in motels that smelled of chlorine and cheap whiskey. Boone carried the data core everywhere. Sometimes he caught himself gripping it like a lifeline. Other times, it felt like a bomb. On the 4th day, Rafe broke the silence again. "We can't run forever. Someone watching every transport node. We need allies." "Who?" Zarya asked. Everyone above O5 is compromised or too scared to move. Boone looked out the cracked motel window toward the freeway. Then we find someone who isn't in the system. They found him 2 days later, Chief Warrant Officer Eamon Greaves, retired intelligence liaison and one of Marshfield's old contacts, living off-grid in the desert east of El Centro. He opened the door with a shotgun in his hand and suspicion in his eyes. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying," he growled. "Vice Admiral Marshfield sent us," Boone said. Greaves froze, the weapon lowered slightly. "That's a name I haven't heard in years." "She's alive?" Zarya asked. His expression hardened. "If she was, she wouldn't have sent you here." But when Boone placed the data core on the table, everything changed. Greaves stared at it for a long time, then sighed. So she finally pulled the pin. He connected it to an old, dust-covered terminal powered by a car battery. The holographic files reappeared, clearer this time. "She built this," he muttered. "A map of infiltration nodes, not just Navy inter-branch joint operations private contractors. Hell, even humanitarian fronts." Boone leaned forward. "You worked with her." "Once. After Kingfisher went sideways, she started digging. Found things she wasn't supposed to. Every time she got close, someone buried the trail deeper." He looked at Boone. "Your father tried to protect her. That's why he died." The words landed like a strike to the chest. Boone's voice trembled. "He was killed in action." Greaves shook his head. He was silenced. She carried that guilt ever since. For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of the old generator filled the space like a heartbeat. Finally, Rafe asked, "So what now?" Greaves leaned back. "Now you disappear, or you finish what she started." Boone didn't hesitate. "We finish." That night, while the others slept, Boone sat outside the shack, staring up at a sky littered with stars. Every one of them looked like a promise, distant, untouchable, but still shining. He thought of his father, of the Admiral walking into fire without fear, of the look in her eyes, not command but conviction. Zarya joined him quietly. "You still think she's out there?" "I don't think," he said softly. "I know." The next morning, the world gave them an answer. A news feed crackled through Greaves' old radio. "Unidentified female rescued from the Pacific after naval explosion. No ID. Critical condition. Transferred to undisclosed facility." Zarya's eyes widened. "It's her." Rafe checked the coordinates embedded in the broadcast metadata. Signal triangulates near Point Mugu Naval Hospital. Boone was already on his feet. "We're going." Greaves tried to stop them. "You walk into that facility, you're walking into a trap." Boone met his gaze. "Then we'll bring the truth with us." By midnight they were on the road north, headlights cutting through desert wind. None of them spoke. The plan wasn't perfect, but purpose had its own gravity. They reached the coast before dawn. Point Mugu shimmered in the fog, chain fences, floodlights, and the distant rhythm of waves. They parked 2 miles out and continued on foot through the dunes. As they neared the outer perimeter, Rafe whispered, "Thermal cameras every 50 meters. We'll need a distraction." Boone nodded toward the supply yard nearby. "Fuel drums. We set a charge, small, loud, harmless." Minutes later, the explosion lit the fog like sunrise. Guards scattered. Sirens wailed. The team slipped through the breach, moving fast, low, silent. Inside, the hospital wing was quiet, too quiet. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung thick. Rows of empty beds stretched beneath flickering lights. Zarya checked a patient roster on the wall. Room 7B, female, unidentified, no visitors. They found it at the end of the corridor. Through the small window, Boone saw her, Marshfield, pale, motionless, machines breathing for her. The woman who'd commanded storms now looked fragile as glass. He pushed the door open quietly. For a moment, he just stood there, not as a candidate before an admiral, but as a son before the ghost of his father's past. "Ma'am," he whispered, "we made it." Her eyelids fluttered barely. A faint, rasping sound left her throat. "Castellano." He leaned closer. "I've got the data, ma'am. We're going to finish this." Her hand twitched toward his. "Not finish, expose." Before he could reply, footsteps echoed down the hall, sharp, deliberate. Rafe hissed, "Security." Boone looked around desperately. There was nowhere to run. The door swung open, and Commander Arcturus Blackwell stepped inside, flanked by two agents in civilian suits. His face was unreadable. "Stand down, candidates." Boone squared his shoulders. "We're not your candidates anymore." Blackwell's gaze dropped to the data core in Boone's hand. "You don't understand what you're holding." "Then explain it," Boone said. The commander sighed, a weary sound. "You think she was the hero. She's the reason this program exists. Kingfisher didn't fail, it evolved. She built the infiltration net to monitor enemy penetration. It was her idea." Zarya shook her head. "You're lying." "Am I?" Blackwell stepped closer. "She lost control of it and now she's cleaning her own mess. You're pawns in her redemption arc." Boone's chest tightened. Could that be true? He looked at Marshfield, her eyes barely open but still steady. "Is that true?" he asked. Her lips moved, barely audible. Control was never the goal. Before Blackwell could react, the monitors beside her bed spiked, alarms shrieking. Marshfield's hand fell away lifeless. The room plunged into chaos. Doctors rushed in. Agents shouted. Boone stood frozen, the data drive clutched in his fist. Zarya pulled him back. "We have to move." But Boone didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on Marshfield's still face. For the first time, he understood what she'd meant. Truth doesn't live in control. It lives in consequence. He turned to Rafe. "We're going to finish it for her, for my father, for every ghost this system buried." They slipped out through the emergency stairwell, alarms echoing through the night. Behind them, the woman they once mocked for wearing no rank had become something far greater than authority. She'd become the silence that made men question everything they obeyed. The world moved on. It always does. By morning, the headlines told a clean story. Vice Admiral Deline Marshfield dies of cardiac failure following arrest. Ongoing investigation into her misconduct, closed by Naval Intelligence Division. No mention of the blackout. No mention of the firefight. No mention of the 3 missing rookies who slipped through Point Mugu's back gate, while the world buried another truth under ceremony and silence. Boone, Zarya, and Rafe didn't sleep for 2 days. They drove north in a stolen utility van, trading license plates every few hours, avoiding main roads. Every military checkpoint they passed carried the same posters, WANTED-4 questioning. Their names, their faces, their betrayal. But Boone didn't feel like a fugitive. He felt hollow, like something inside him had broken and didn't know how to heal. The woman he'd once mocked had died for something bigger than herself. And all he could think about was the way her eyes had stayed steady, even as her body failed. Control was never the goal. The words followed him like a ghost. They reached a safe house in Nevada 2 nights later, a forgotten bunker built into a canyon wall, one of Greaves' old contingency sites. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. Rafe powered up the generators while Zarya checked the perimeter sensors. Boone sat at the steel table, the data drive before him. It felt heavier now, not because of what it contained, but because of what it cost. Rafe joined him. "I finally got a partial decryption. The Admiral's security layers were meant to trigger only after her biometric death signal. That's why it unlocked when she flatlined." Boone's head lifted. "Show me." The holographic projection flickered to life. Rows of files, logs, intercepted communications, decades of hidden reports. But one file glowed differently. Marked KNGF-01, Operation Kingfisher, UNREDSTD. Zarya leaned closer. The original mission. Rafe opened it. Static first, then a video feed, grainy, time-stamped years ago. The jungle, heavy rain, gunfire in the distance. A woman's voice over comms. Team 2 moved to extraction point Delta. Repeat, Delta, we're compromised. The camera shifted, showing a squad moving through mud marshfield in front, her uniform soaked, her face half-shadowed. Another voice cut through the static, younger, familiar. This is Castellano. We've got wounded. They knew our approach vector. Boone's breath caught, his father's voice. The feed jolted, the sound of a rifle crack, someone shouting down, then chaos, fire, shouting, screaming. Finally Marshfield's voice again, ragged and furious. We've been betrayed. Someone sold our coordinates. The screen froze. Then the final frame, Marshfield dragging a wounded man toward a burning helicopter. The ID tag visible on his vest read CASTAYNOJ. The file ended. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the generator. Rafe whispered, her guilt wasn't over failure, it was over surviving. Boone's hands trembled. She spent her life trying to find who betrayed them. Zarya nodded slowly, and now we have her trail. Rafe pulled up a second folder, marked Kingfisher/Continuity Network. A complex web of connections filled the projection. Faces, names, corporations, defense contractors, and coded financial trails looping through front organizations and research partnerships. Zarya's brow furrowed. That's global. Rafe pointed. See this node, NID Liaison Division, Blackwell's unit. He wasn't her enemy, he was her handler. Boone's head snapped up. Handler. Yeah, she wasn't rogue. She was authorized to hunt infiltrators until she got too close. Then they burned her to protect the system. Boone's voice turned hard. So Kingfisher never ended. No, Rafe said. It evolved into the very thing it was meant to destroy. Silence. For a long time, Boone just stared at the data. Every line felt like a pulse from the past, a chain leading back to his father, to Marshfield, to every name buried beneath classified. Zarya finally spoke. What do we do with it? Boone looked up. His eyes were steady again. We finish what she started. The first step was finding a leak. Not the kind you post online, but the kind that hurts the right people, controlled, undeniable, irreversible. Rafe found one in Aquila Systems, a private contractor listed in the Kingfisher network, manufacturing drones and AI-driven recon tech for multiple allied militaries. Front company, he said, but the real HQ's under civilian cover in Sacramento. Then that's where we go, Boone said. They traveled light, civilian clothes, forged IDs, sidearms. Zarya carried her sniper optics disguised as camera gear. Rafe built a custom data injector from spare drives and an old phone. 3 people against a system that spanned continents. They reached Sacramento under rain. Aquila's headquarters rose sleek and mirrored against the skyline, just another corporate shell hiding shadows. They slipped into the underground garage after midnight, bypassing biometric locks using Marshfield's extracted access codes. Inside, the lights were dim, the silence sterile. Rafe located the central server hub. We drop the payload here, the network copy goes live in every encrypted news node linked to our security chain. Once uploaded, no one can erase it. Boone nodded. Do it. Rafe connected the drive. Data began to pulse through the cables, digital veins of truth racing toward daylight. Then came the sound they all feared, the heavy clack of boots. Security team, armed. Zarya moved fast, cutting the lights. Shadows swallowed the hall. The team ducked behind equipment racks as red laser sights danced across the walls. Boone whispered, how long? 2 minutes, Rafe said. fingers flying over the interface. Make it one. Bullets tore through the metal casing beside them. Sparks rained. Boone fired back once, controlled, not to kill, just to stall. Upload at 70%, Rafe said. Zarya peered through her scope, whispering coordinates. 2 on left, 1 near the door. Take the one near the door, Boone said. She exhaled slowly. 1 shot, the guard dropped. 80%. Sirens blared across the building. They know we're here, Rafe warned. Let them, Boone said. We're not leaving until it's done. Another burst of gunfire. Rafe flinched but kept typing. 93%, come on, come on. Then the main power grid cut. Darkness swallowed everything. Back up, Boone shouted. Rafe slammed a manual override. We lost main transmission, but the secondary channels pushing data to an off-site relay. How much? 87%, enough to reconstruct. Zarya threw a smoke charge, filling the hall with gray haze. Then let's get out before 87 becomes 0. They fought their way to the stairwell, hearts hammering, alarms screaming. By the time they reached the street, police sirens echoed from blocks away. Helicopters circled overhead, searchlights slicing through rain. Rafe clutched the half-transferred drive. We've got pieces of it, enough to prove she was right. Boone's jaw set. Pieces are all revolutions ever start with. They vanished into the night. 3 days later, the leaks began. Anonymous data drops hit independent networks across the world, coded files exposing military contracts, falsified identities, covert infiltration programs. None of them mentioned Marshfield by name. But every thread led back to her work. The world didn't believe at first. It never does. Then came the footage. The video of Operation Kingfisher, unredacted and unedited, appeared on a foreign network. It showed everything: the betrayal, the ambush, the faces, including the one giving orders over comms to redirect fire. Commander Arcturus Blackwell, the man now in charge of cleaning up her legacy. The revelation tore through Washington like wildfire. Investigations reopened. Oversight committees convened. And somewhere in that storm, Boone, Zarya, and Rafe became the ghosts Marshfield had once been, unseen, unheard, but everywhere that truth demanded presence. They didn't hide anymore. They moved quietly, carefully, spreading what she died for. Every time the world tried to forget her, they made sure it couldn't. One night, weeks later, Boone sat alone in the bunker again, looking at the horizon. A desert dawn, pink bleeding into gold. He pulled something from his pocket. A small, worn challenge coin, her coin. On one side, the naval crest. On the other, the faint engraving his father must have scratched in years ago. Truth before glory. Zarya's voice broke the quiet. You think it's over? Boone shook his head. Truth doesn't end, it just waits. He closed his hand around the coin, and for the first time since the chaos began, his voice softened. She taught us that dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind shifted. Somewhere beyond the rising sun, the world was still trying to decide whether to remember her as a traitor or a savior. But Boone already knew the answer. Because he'd seen it, not in her medals, not in her rank, but in the way she faced fire with silence. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is not fight the war they're given, but expose the one no one else sees. It started as a whisper. Then it became a storm. Within a week, classified networks across 3 continents were breached, not by hackers, but by the truth. News anchors called it the Kingfisher disclosure. Governments called it espionage. But to Boone Castellano, it was justice finally crawling out of its grave. Every leak, every file, every timestamp carried her fingerprints. Vice Admiral Deline Marshfield's legacy burning through the system she once protected. The woman they branded a traitor was becoming the proof that loyalty, sometimes demands rebellion. But justice has a price, and those who deal in shadows don't let debts go unpaid. It happened at dawn, a drone strike that wasn't supposed to exist. The desert air split apart as a missile hit the canyon ridge above the safe house. Boone, Zarya, and Rafe dove for cover, the explosion raining dust and rock. "They found us," Zarya shouted. "Pack everything," Boone barked, grabbing the drives. "We move now." Rafe was already pulling wires from the terminal, his hands shaking. They traced the upload nodes. They're burning every signal. Another explosion shook the ground, closer this time. Boone led them through the back tunnel, emerging into the dry ravine behind the ridge. Smoke clawed the horizon. Their safe house was gone. "They won't stop," Rafe said. "The network's bleeding credibility. The Pentagon's calling the leaks foreign disinformation." "Then we hit harder," Boone replied. Zarya shot him a look. "We're being hunted, Boone. We have no backup, no command, no country that admits we exist." He turned toward the rising sun. His eyes burned, not from smoke, from resolve. "Then we do what she did. We fight without permission." They moved east, avoiding satellites, burning every trace of their movement. Each day blurred into the next. Stolen fuel, hidden roads, motel rooms where sleep came in short, haunted bursts. At night, they intercepted broadcasts. Blackwell was on every network, calm, composed, righteous. Vice Admiral Marshfield acted alone. Her actions endangered classified operations. "We mourn her, but we will not let her mistakes tarnish the integrity of this institution." Lies spoken with the confidence of power. Zarya threw the tablet across the room. "He's rewriting history before it's even cold." Rafe looked up from his terminal. "We still have unexposed layers in the data. The deeper files she encrypted under dual authentication, her and your father." Boone frowned. "My father's gone." "Yeah," Rafe said quietly, "but his access code is." He projected a screen of old mission rosters, cross-referencing biometric patterns with family lineages. "If your DNA sequence is close enough, we can brute force her dual lock." Boone hesitated. "And if it fails?" "System self-wipes, all of it." He took a breath. "Do it." Rafe pricked his finger, took a small blood sample, ran it through the sequencer. The drive blinked red, then yellow, then green. "Access granted." Files opened like wounds. Not just missions, programs. Codenames scrolled across the display: Aegis Cadre, Silent Divide, Resolute Dawn, each tied to human subjects, soldiers psychologically conditioned, their memories fragmented, their loyalties rewritten. Zarya's face went pale. "This isn't infiltration. This is engineering." Rafe nodded grimly. "Cognitive warfare. They didn't plant agents, they created them." Boone stared, speechless. The names in the database weren't just strangers. They were active duty personnel, commanders, diplomats. And at the center of it all, the same signature: authorization, Blackwell A. The air went still. Boone whispered. "He turned her program into a weapon." Rafe scrolled further. "There's one more file, a backup contingency labeled MARA, access restricted." "Mara?" Zarya asked. Rafe frowned. "Latin root means bitter or destroyer." He clicked. The feed opened to a hidden video file, newer, clearer. Blackwell appeared on screen, standing in front of an operations board filled with names and maps. His voice was cold, methodical. "If the leaks continue, initiate Protocol Mara. Identify and neutralize all operatives tied to Marshfield's remnants. Authorization Alpha 1 Delta." Boone's jaw tightened. "He's already hunting everyone connected to her." Rafe looked at him. "That includes us." Zarya stepped forward. "Then we make the first move." The plan came together slowly, like stitching torn cloth in a storm. If they could expose the full extent of Project Mara to international oversight, Blackwell's deniability would collapse. But to do that, they needed access to the original data servers inside Naval Intelligence Headquarters in Arlington, Blackwell's fortress. Breaking into it would take more than courage. It would take madness. But Boone had already crossed that line. For days, they prepared blueprints, security layouts, fake credentials stolen from lower-level analysts. Rafe hacked the ID chips. Zarya acquired suppressed weapons and EMP charges from black market contacts. The night before the mission, they sat in silence around a dying campfire. No plans, no speeches, just the crackle of flames and the ache of knowing what morning would bring. Boone finally spoke. "You don't have to do this." Zarya smiled faintly. "She died for truth. You think we're stopping now?" Rafe added softly, "If we die tomorrow, at least we'll be on the right side of the story." Boone looked into the fire. "She once told me loyalty isn't obedience, it's courage in silence." No one replied. They didn't need to. Arlington, 3 nights later. The headquarters rose like a monolith of glass and shadow, ringed by motion sensors and silent guards. They entered through the underground loading bay, disguised as maintenance technicians. Rafe's forged passes held long enough to reach the inner data wing. Every heartbeat sounded like thunder. "Server room ahead," Rafe whispered. "Third floor, east corridor. That's where the Project Mara archive lives." Zarya scanned the hall, 2 guards rotating every 60 seconds. "On my mark," Boone said. The distraction was silent, a light glitch in the power grid, just enough to dim cameras for 5 seconds. They moved fast. 1 takedown, 2 steps, and the hall was clear. Rafe accessed the terminal, connecting their drive. "We're in." The files began to copy, endless lines of names, coordinates, psychological profiles. Zarya stood watch, movement on the west corridor. Boone's voice was calm. 2 more minutes. That's when he heard it. The faintest click behind them. A pistol hammer. He turned slowly and froze. Commander Arcturus Blackwell stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 silent operatives. His uniform immaculate, his eyes cold. "I should have known," he said quietly. "The Admiral's ghosts couldn't stay buried." Boone stepped forward, blocking the others. "You turned her mission into a weapon." Blackwell's expression barely shifted. "I perfected it. She was weak. You can't fight shadows with conscience." "She believed in accountability," Boone said. "She believed in fantasy," Blackwell countered. "You think leaking data changes anything. The machine rebuilds itself. It always has." He raised his weapon, "But removing you slows it down." Boone didn't hesitate. He lunged, grabbing the barrel as it fired. The shot went wide, slamming into the server rack. Alarms erupted. Zarya fired once, dropping 1 operative. Rafe yanked the drive from the console as sparks flew. "Go," Boone shouted. They ran. Smoke filled the corridor, alarms wailing. Blackwell fired again, bullets tearing into metal. Rafe stumbled, clutching his side. "I'm hit." "Keep moving." Boone grabbed him under the arm. They burst through the maintenance stairwell as explosions rippled below, automated lockdowns sealing sections of the building. By the time they reached the garage exit, their lungs burned. Zarya hotwired a transport van, tires screeching as they tore into the night. Boone looked back at the headquarters, fire glinting off his face. Rafe lay pale but conscious in the backseat, holding the drive to his chest. "We got it, full copy." Zarya glanced in the mirror. "You think he's dead?" Boone shook his head. "Men like him don't die that easily." Outside, the skyline flickered with emergency lights. Sirens, drones, chaos. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath again. And Boone realized that the war wasn't ending. It was changing shape. Marshfield had fought to reveal a system, rotting from the inside. Now that system was fighting back. He looked at the drive glowing faintly in his hand. the last fragment of her truth. She was right, he murmured. Control was never the goal. The van disappeared into the storm. And somewhere in the smoke-filled ruin of a Data wing, Commander Blackwell stood amid shattered glass, bleeding, furious, alive. He whispered into his comm, "Activate Mara." They used to think truth was a weapon. Now they knew it was a target. The night after Arlington burned, Boone, Zarya, and Rafe disappeared into the maze of the eastern seaboard. The van that had carried them from the fire limped into the backlots of Baltimore, its paint blackened by smoke, its engine coughing out final breaths. They left it behind near a scrapyard and walked the rest of the way, ghosts in plain clothes. Every news channel screamed chaos. Government servers crippled, intelligence leaks traced to rogue defectors. And above it all, the same name appeared again and again, Operation Mara. Blackwell's revenge wasn't clean, it wasn't surgical. It was absolute. Within 48 hours, people tied to Marshfield's name started vanishing, not arrested, not questioned, erased. Journalists, contractors, mid-level analysts, all dead in accidents and muggings that smelled too organized to be random. Boone watched the reports in silence, every word adding weight to the guilt pressing against his ribs. Rafe lay in a makeshift cot beside him, pale from the wound he'd taken during the escape. Blood loss had slowed him down, but not his mind. His fingers never stopped moving, still coding, still planning, still fighting. Zarya watched over both of them, exhaustion carving lines into her face that hadn't been there before. "What now?" she asked quietly. "We can't keep running forever." Boone looked at the small data drive, their last link to Marshfield's truth. "We don't run. We make it impossible for them to hide." "Broadcast it," Rafe croaked from his cot. "They'll trace it in seconds." "Then we don't broadcast," Boone said. "We bury it where no one can kill it." They moved again that night south toward the Virginia countryside, abandoned farm roads, forgotten silos, the kind of places satellites didn't care about. Rafe had one plan left, insane, desperate, but possible. The drive, encrypted to military-grade firewalls. If we upload to a public system, they'll isolate and shut it down. But if we hide the data inside a legitimate one, buried under layers of civilian networks, it'll spread by replication. "Like a virus?" Zarya asked. "Like a seed," Rafe said weakly. "One they can't uproot." They stopped in an old grain elevator wired with outdated satellite internet. Boone carried Rafe inside, laying him against the wall. The faint hum of the equipment filled the dusty air. Rafe smiled faintly. "Kind of poetic, huh? Ending a war with a signal instead of a bullet." "Don't start writing eulogies," Boone said. "You're not dying on me." Zarya hooked up the gear, checking the uplink. "Signal's weak but stable. This will work." Rafe nodded, then looked at Boone. "You ever think about what happens when this all ends?" Boone hesitated. "You mean if we survive?" "No," Rafe said, voice thin. "I mean if it works, if the truth really gets out, you think they'll thank us?" Boone's eyes were tired but steady. "I don't care if they do. She didn't fight for gratitude. She fought because silence was worse." The upload began at 3:17 a.m. Outside, the wind howled like the ghosts of every mission that had gone wrong. Lines of code streamed across the old monitor, thousands of names, missions, contracts, every secret Kingfisher and Mara had ever buried. Rafe watched the data climb. "It's working. Node replication online, 10 mirrors 2050. He winced, clutching his side. Zarya steadied him. "You're bleeding again," she said. "I'll live long enough to finish this." Boone checked the perimeter through the cracked window. The night looked still, but stillness had lied before. At 4:02 a.m., Rafe's screen flashed red. "Unauthorized trace," he hissed. "They've found the signal." Zarya's heart pounded. "How?" Backdoor ping through one of the civilian relays. Damn it, they're fast. Boone grabbed his rifle. How much time? 2 minutes, maybe less. Then we hold them for 2. He moved outside into the freezing dark, breath fogging in the cold air. He saw headlights cresting the hill, 3 vehicles, black, silent. No sirens, just purpose. Zarya joined him, weapon ready. 2 minutes. Make them count. The first van hit the field fence. Boone fired once, a warning, not a plea. Gunfire answered. Bullets tore through the dark, tracers streaking the air. Zarya dropped to a knee, firing controlled bursts. The sound echoed through the valley. Inside, Rafe stared at the flickering screen, whispering under his breath. Come on, come on. At 98%, the monitor glitched, static interference. The system began rerouting. Almost there. A bullet shattered the satellite dish above. Sparks cascaded across the roof. The signal stuttered, dropped to 99%, froze. Rafe slammed his fist against the console. No, no, come on. Then the screen flashed green. Upload complete. He exhaled once, a sound halfway between laughter and relief. Outside, the gunfire ceased. Boone crouched behind the burnt-out truck, chest heaving. Zarya was beside him, smoke rising from her rifle. Then headlights cut through the dark again. A single SUV rolled up the hill, slow, deliberate. Boone felt the dread before he saw the face. Commander Arcturus Blackwell stepped out, coat immaculate despite the mud. No guards this time, just him. He looked almost calm. You've done impressive damage, Blackwell said. You think truth changes anything? Boone didn't answer. You uploaded a file, sure, but you forget people don't want truth. They want order, and I own the narrative. Zarya leveled her weapon. You don't own anything anymore. Blackwell's gaze flicked to her. Careful, Lieutenant Capper, you're out of ranks to lose. Boone stepped forward. You built Mara, you killed Marshfield. You think this ends with your victory speech. Blackwell smiled faintly. It ends the way all wars end, with compromise and amnesia. Before Boone could reply, a faint sound crackled through the comm unit clipped to his vest. A voice, distorted, weak, but unmistakable. Castellano, do not engage. Boone froze. Admiral. Zarya's eyes widened. She's alive. The voice came again, clearer now. You've done enough, the data's safe. Get out, let the truth speak. Blackwell frowned, disbelief flickering across his face. Impossible, she's dead. Boone's grip tightened on his rifle. Guess ghosts don't stay buried. Blackwell's composure cracked for the first time. He raised his weapon. Then you'll die like she should have. 2 shots rang out. One from Blackwell, one from Boone. Silence followed. Boone stumbled back, the world tilting. Blackwell dropped to his knees, blood spreading across his uniform. He looked up at Boone, pain mixing with bitterness. You think this ends with me? There's always another Mara, another system. Boone's voice was quiet, steady. Maybe, but they'll remember you as the man she stopped. Blackwell tried to speak again, then collapsed. Boone turned toward Zarya. We need to move, now. Inside, Rafe lay slumped beside the console. The upload complete, his breathing shallow. Zarya knelt beside him. Rafe, hey, stay with me. He smiled faintly. We did it, it's everywhere now. Boone crouched beside him. You're going to make it. Rafe's eyes fluttered. She'd be proud of you, Boone. And then stillness. Zarya pressed her forehead to his, whispering something in a language Boone didn't understand. Outside, the first streaks of dawn touched the horizon, pale, indifferent light over the ashes of another night of war. Boone walked out into the morning, rifle in hand, blood on his sleeve, eyes fixed on the sky. The radio on his vest crackled once more. Castellano, do you copy? He swallowed hard. I hear you. You did what needed to be done. Kingfisher's over. But listen carefully, Mara was never one man. It was an idea, and ideas don't die, they evolve. Her voice faded. He stood there for a long time, wind cutting through the quiet. Then he said softly, "Then so do we." He looked back at Zarya, tears streaking her dirt-covered face. "He didn't die for nothing," she said. "No," Boone murmured, "none of them did." Somewhere far away, the first broadcasts began, news anchors stumbling through words they didn't yet understand, citizens reading reports that would shake the pillars of power. The truth was out. Not loud, not triumphant, just undeniable. And that was enough. No one saw the sun rise that morning. But everyone felt it. Somewhere between the wreckage and the silence, the world had changed, not with an explosion, not with a speech, but with a file. The Kingfisher disclosure, they called it now. A leak that didn't demand belief, it forced it. It spread through civilian networks like wildfire. Every attempt to erase it only made it multiply. The data had no owner, no author, no signature, just truth. Raw, uncomfortable, and alive. Governments scrambled. Allies questioned allies. Oversight committees sprouted overnight like weeds in concrete. And amid the chaos, names began to surface, people long buried under the weight of classified. People like James Castellano. People like Deline Marshfield. Weeks passed before Boone stopped moving. He and Zarya drove south again. No destination, just the rhythm of tires over old highways. Sometimes silence filled the car. Sometimes it was the only thing that made sense. Rafe was gone, Blackwell too. Two ghosts, one who tried to save the truth, one who tried to kill it, both erased by the same storm. They found shelter on the outskirts of an old naval town, a place where no one asked names and cash still meant privacy. At night, Boone would sit on the pier, the sea dark and endless, the coin in his palm reflecting faint light from a dying moon. He turned it over, feeling the weight of its inscription. Truth before glory. Sometimes he wondered if Marshfield had seen it before she died, if she'd recognized his father's mark on it. Maybe she had. Maybe that was why she chose him. Zarya joined him one night, hands deep in her jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the water. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked quietly. Boone's answer came slow. "You mean for us or for them?" "For the world." He smiled faintly, tired but real. "World keeps spinning. It'll bury this like it buries everything else." "Then why do it?" "Because she couldn't," he said simply. "Because someone had to." Zarya nodded, her breath fogging in the cold. She'd have liked that answer. The news shifted over the next month. At first, denial. Then outrage. Then the slow, reluctant acceptance that comes when proof won't vanish. Independent tribunals opened inquiries into the Mara Protocol, though no one could confirm who authorized it. Blackwell was declared missing in action. A dozen other officials retired quietly. Marshfield's name, once tied to scandal, began to re-emerge as something else. Historians called her a conflicted patriot. The media called her a whistleblower in uniform. But those who had known her, the few who survived her silence, called her what she truly was. A mirror, reflecting the system that created her. And like all mirrors, she'd been shattered for showing too much. Boone started writing again. Not reports, not statements, just fragments of memories stitched together into something human. He wrote about her stillness, her scar, the way she never shouted but always made the room quieter just by being in it. He wrote about his father, the laugh, the stubbornness, the way his eyes looked the day he left for Kingfisher. And he wrote about Rafe, whose hands never stopped fighting even when his body had given up. He never planned to show it to anyone, but Zarya read it one night when he wasn't looking. "You're good at this," she said softly. "It's not writing," he replied. "It's remembering." She handed the notebook back. "Sometimes remembering is resistance." He didn't argue. It was late spring when the letter came. No name, no return address, just a single line printed across the envelope. For the ones who carried the silence. Inside, a small data chip and a handwritten note. "You were right to believe she was dead. You were wrong to believe she was gone." Attached was a single still image, grainy, satellite-grade. A coastal facility somewhere off the Azores. On the balcony, a figure in uniform, older, thinner, leaning on a cane. Marshfield. Zarya stared at the image, speechless. "Is it real?" Boone didn't answer. He didn't have to. "She survived," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Or she's making sure the world thinks she did." Either way, it meant one thing. Her fight wasn't over. 2 months later, they went their separate ways. Zarya left first, said she was heading east to join an NGO that was quietly rebuilding oversight for military ethics. "Legal cover for doing what we actually believe in," she joked. Boone watched her leave with a hug and a salute that wasn't regulation but meant more. After that, he moved inland, found work under an alias, far from bases and uniforms. A quiet life built on silence and service, fixing engines, patching roofs, helping people who didn't know his name and didn't need to. But at night, he still checked the radio. Always tuned to the same frequency, 739er. Sometimes static. Sometimes nothing. And once, just once, a voice. Castellano, still listening. He froze, heart hammering. "Yes," he whispered. "Good, then you already understand. Truth doesn't end when it's known. It ends when it's forgotten." "Admiral." "No ranks anymore," she said softly. "Just people keep watching." And the line went dead. He sat there in the dark, staring at the old receiver. For the first time in months, he smiled. The next morning, he walked down to the shore. The ocean stretched endless and indifferent, the same one that had swallowed and returned so many stories. He stood there for a long time, the wind cold against his face, the challenge coin warm in his palm. He thought about what she'd said the day he met her, that first moment on the range, when she'd answered his arrogance with a single word. "Admiral." He thought it was rank then, power. Now he knew it was something else entirely. It was ownership, not of others but of self. She had never needed to shout to command. She had never needed to prove she belonged. Her authority had been written in the scars she didn't hide, and the silences she refused to break. He knelt at the water's edge and set the coin down on the sand. The waves reached for it, pulled it in, carried it away. Some stories didn't need to be kept. They just needed to be lived. Weeks later, a broadcast aired on an independent network no one could trace. A calm voice spoke over black and white images of naval training grounds, jungle battlefields, and silent corridors filled with dust and ghosts. For every soldier who was told to obey instead of think. For every officer who chose silence instead of truth. For every ghost that walked so others could wake up. This isn't vengeance, it's remembrance. Operation Kingfisher was never about betrayal. It was about who we become when loyalty and conscience collide. The final frame showed a woman's face, faint, smiling, scarred, fading into light. Then the screen went black. And the voice, one last time, spoke the words that would outlive every uniform, every order, every war. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.